My fellow students, welcome to your channel, SRDA Smart Research and Data Analytics. The purpose of this channel is to help you learn the best and the advanced techniques of using Smart PLS. However, before diving into a series of videos and tutorials about the specific and the focused use of Smart PLS, it is worthwhile introducing you to SEM. In this film, we're going to share information about structural equation modeling. What's structural equation modeling and why is it very important for master and PhD students? Smart PLS can be a simple statistical technique. However, it's important to note that SEM tends to use or integrate a multiple types or multiple frameworks or techniques in order to study complex phenomenon or phenomena. So, SEM is not like linear regression. It's not one simple statistical technique. However, it integrates a sum of techniques that can be used together to study complex variables, abstract variables, like for instance intelligence, latent variables, like for instance social power, some other variables. So, structural equation modeling is used by PhD students and master students to study complex relationships, to investigate complex relationships between exogenous and endogenous variables, including mediation and mediator and mediating effects. So, SEM might integrate measurement theory that's used in psychology, factor analysis that's used in psychology and statistics, path analysis used in biology and epidemiology, regression, simultaneous equation used in econometrics and other disciplines. So, it integrates a sum of techniques together as one statistical framework aiming for studying complex relationships among variables that will come to very soon. In addition, through structural equation modeling, researchers can study dynamic phenomenon, dynamic relationships that evolve and changes over time. And it is nearly impossible to study such relationships with traditional classical statistical techniques such as linear regressions, for instance. Let's proceed further. SEM can help PhD and master students to answer complex questions with latent and abstract concepts. For instance, a recent study that I conducted for a PhD studying the impact of organizational culture on AIS success. Organizational culture can be manifested, is a latent variable that can be manifested into 100 other variables, according to literature. So, SEM helps answering complex questions. For instance, what's the impact of intelligence on educational progress? Okay, how can we measure intelligence? It's an abstract concept that we have to create observable variables or indicators for which that can be many in order to measure intelligence. Furthermore, SEM studies complex relationships interlinking variables that can be many together, many dependent, many independent variables. This is one specific criteria that differentiates SEM from other regression models, linear regression models. Furthermore, as I mentioned, mediation and moderation effects can be introduced as well into one structural equation model. SEM can be referred to in literature as variance structure-based analysis, covariance structure-based analysis. We're gonna come throughout the video series coming to differentiate between variance-based and covariance-based. For instance, Smart PLS as a software is variance-based analysis or structural equation model analysis. However, AMOS, another famous software, is a covariance-based analysis software. It can be referred to as causal modeling, interlinking many relationships together, or analysis of linear structural relationship, such as Literal, which is as well one main software used for structural equation modeling. Some software that can be used for structural equation modeling is Smart PLS. It is our favorite, and it is the one that the video series will focus on. Some others might be like AMOS, M+, EQS, Tetrad, R, Strata, etc. Many of these software can be downloaded. For instance, Smart PLS will come to where we download it as a student version, and also as a student you can purchase monthly subscriptions for a very affordable price. We don't advise about any, however, personally I prefer Smart PLS because it is mainly more contemporary or more trendy than others, and it can tackle complex studies and investigations among latent variables that may be manifested with hundreds of observable indicators. Latent variables or hypothetical variables, it's important to understand what are those. Organizational culture is one, intelligence is one, social capital is one. Latent variable is an abstract concept. It cannot be measured. We can't have a criteria that measure it directly. However, we can split it or manifest it into other observable indicators. For instance, organizational culture can be manifested into many observable indicators that we'll come to in a bit. Like, for instance, teamwork is one manifestation or one observable indicator. Core values, symbols, empowerment, etc. Observable indicators are the questionnaire items that PhD and master students usually develop or adopt in order to do a specific study. Those are observable indicators, such as the case for organizational culture. The observable indicators will be those that I already spoke about, like teamwork. We study teamwork, and then this reflects or measures a part of organizational culture. However, we have to note as well that always we have to allow for systematic error and random error. So organizational culture can be measured by those observable variables or observable indicators. However, we have to understand as well that there are some other indicators that we cannot measure that may have an influence on the main construct but cannot be measured. Those are systematic random errors or systematic errors. And sometimes in a questionnaire we might have a bias from the respondents resulting in systematic errors. The benefits of the latent variables, as I mentioned, most social concepts like social power, for instance, are multifaceted, can be reflected into many observable variables. Intelligence, for instance, is one, social power is one, social capital is one, personality is another construct that can be measured into many observable variables. It's important in our study or in our investigations to reduce random error in measured constructs. Dependent variables, random error, unbiased but less precise. Independent variables, so in case of independent variables we might face random errors. Independent variables, usually random errors tend to attenuate regression coefficients towards zero. So PhD students, master students, it's important when constructing your models to understand or to take into considerations the possible random errors and the systematic errors that might impact the relationships in the studied variables. Path analysis, very important. Path analysis, very important. Path analysis are what? We have seen many models in which you may see forms like ellipse forms or rectangular forms in which you see observable variables. Usually the ellipse form represents an abstract variable or a construct. Pathways are preferred, or path analysis are preferred by scientists, especially those scientists in the social studies, because they rely on diagrammatic representations of relationships among one variable and the other. It's maybe mathematicians here won't love it, but social scientists actually would like relying on diagrammatic representations of relationships rather than complex formulas. In path analysis, like we're coming to in Smart PLS, you will see that we are representing the relationships among the variables through path, through diagrams, mainly ellipse, mainly as well rectangular shapes, circular shapes, etc. Regression equations are embedded in those diagrams, and social scientists or scientists don't need that much of complex understanding for the relationships or the equations that would represent those relationships. In SEM, we're not limited to studying one relationship between two variables, but rather we can study relationships between multiple variables that are independent and other multiple variables that are dependent. Plus, on top of that, we can study mediating relationships and moderating relationships. So variables that can mediate the interrelationship or the relationship between the independent and the dependent variables. those that we call moderating and mediating variables. As you notice, this is one structural equation modeling that I constructed during or for my PhD studying what? Studying how organizational culture impacts AAS success. But as I already explained, organizational culture is not a simple variable that can be studied. However, it's a latent construct that is manifested by many other variables. And here, for the purpose of this study, I had to pick up only 17 variables like empowerment, teamwork, capability development, etc. Each of those variables is represented or is measured by many observable indicators. You will see that in rectangular shapes. AIS success, accounting information system success as well, is measured by a variety of other variables or manifestations. And plus, on top of that, this relationship between organizational culture and AIS success is influenced by some other moderating variables like size of organizations, industry, location, market level, etc. Plus mediating variables such as use and user satisfaction. So as you notice, in this SEM, in this structural equation model, we study complex relationships. Another smart PLS SEM application you will see as well. This is for one of the articles that I have or we have already wrote along with my supervisors. You see, we are studying here the human component, or how nepotism impacts the human component of ERP, enterprise resource planning systems. And you see, the human component is manifested by many other latent variables that are measured by those questionnaire items. For instance, if we take procedures, it's measured by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 questionnaire items. Nepotism is measured by 10 questionnaire items. So, a structural equation model usually is represented through a path diagram showing latent variables, latent abstract variables, latent constructs, as well we name it, and observable indicators. Observable indicators referring to something like questionnaire items that are measuring, helping you to measure a specific variable. In conclusion, this SEM video or film is there to give you some background about studying complex relationships or structural equation models for PhD and master studies. There are multiple software that can be used. However, our video series will focus only on Smart PLS and will introduce you to advanced as well as introductory techniques of using Smart PLS. Thank you for watching, and please stay tuned for the next coming video. Thank you.